Sarah Mitchell had always been careful about her asthma. At 28, she carried 2 inhalers everywhere and knew exactly which triggers to avoid. The spring air in downtown Portland was usually manageable, but today felt different. She hurried down the busy sidewalk toward the coffee shop where she worked, already running 15 minutes late for her afternoon shift. The morning had started well enough. Sarah lived in a small apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery, and the elderly woman had insisted on giving her fresh croissants for breakfast. Sarah appreciated the kindness, especially since money was tight. Working part-time at the coffee shop barely covered her rent and medical expenses, but she was grateful to have any job at all. As she walked, Sarah noticed the construction crews had started early today. Dust filled the air from the renovation project on 3rd Street, and she could feel her chest beginning to tighten. She slowed her pace and reached for her rescue inhaler, taking a quick puff. The familiar taste of the medication was reassuring, but her breathing didn't improve as much as usual. The coffee shop, Brew Haven, was just 2 blocks away when Sarah felt the first real wave of panic. Her chest felt like someone was squeezing it with iron bands. She stopped walking and leaned against a lamppost, trying to focus on the breathing exercises her doctor had taught her. Slow inhale through the nose, hold for 3 seconds, exhale through pursed lips. But each breath felt like she was trying to breathe through a straw. People walked past her on the busy sidewalk, most too absorbed in their phones or conversations to notice her distress. Sarah fumbled for her inhaler again, her hand shaking now. She pressed it to her lips and activated it, but nothing happened. Empty. Her backup inhaler was in her purse, and she dug through it frantically, knocking her wallet and keys onto the pavement. A businessman in an expensive suit stepped around her fallen items without stopping. A group of college students laughed loudly as they passed, not seeing her struggle. Sarah's vision began to blur around the edges, and she knew she was in serious trouble. She had experienced asthma attacks before, but this felt different. More severe, more frightening. Her backup inhaler was also empty. Sarah stared at it in disbelief, remembering now that she had used it yesterday during a particularly stressful moment at work, when a customer had been yelling at her. She had meant to pick up refills from the pharmacy, but her last paycheck had been smaller than expected, and she had chosen to pay rent instead. The realization that she had no medication hit her like a physical blow. Sarah tried to call out for help, but only a whisper emerged from her constricted throat. Her legs felt weak, and she slid down the lamppost until she was sitting on the concrete. The world seemed to be spinning, and each attempt to breathe felt like drowning in reverse. Through her panic, Sarah became aware of footsteps approaching. Someone was running toward her, but her vision was too blurry to make out details. She heard a man's voice, urgent but calm, asking if she was okay. Strong hands gently touched her shoulders, and she felt someone kneeling beside her. "Hey, can you hear me? What's wrong?" The voice belonged to a man, probably in his 30s, with a slight accent she couldn't place. Sarah tried to respond, but could only point to her empty inhaler. Understanding flashed across his face immediately. "Asthma attack," he said, more to himself than to her. "Okay, I'm going to help you. My name is Marcus, and I need you to try to stay calm." His voice was steady and reassuring, like he had dealt with medical emergencies before. Sarah felt some of her panic ease slightly, though her breathing remained labored. Marcus quickly assessed the situation. He looked at the empty inhalers on the ground, then back at Sarah's pale face. "Do you have any medication at home? A nebulizer? Anything?" Sarah managed to shake her head weakly. She lived paycheck to paycheck and couldn't afford the expensive breathing treatments her doctor had recommended. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed 911. While he spoke to the dispatcher, he kept one hand on Sarah's shoulder, his presence somehow making the terrifying situation feel more manageable. He described her symptoms clearly and gave their exact location, demonstrating a familiarity with emergency procedures that surprised her. "They're on their way," he told her after hanging up. "The ambulance will be here in about 5 minutes. I need you to focus on my voice and try to breathe with me, okay?" Marcus began demonstrating slow, controlled breathing, exaggerating the movement so Sarah could follow along despite her distress. As they waited, Marcus noticed a small crowd beginning to gather. Some people offered help while others simply stared. He positioned himself to shield Sarah from the curious onlookers, giving her some privacy during her vulnerable moment. His protective instinct kicked in naturally, though he didn't stop to analyze why he felt so responsible for this stranger. Sarah found herself studying Marcus's face as he continued to coach her breathing. He had kind brown eyes and an honest face with slight worry lines that suggested he was used to taking care of others. There was something about his calm competence that made her feel safer, even as her body continued to betray her. The sound of sirens grew closer, and Sarah felt a wave of relief mixed with anxiety. Ambulance rides were expensive, and she knew she couldn't afford it. But Marcus seemed to sense her concern. "Don't worry about anything except getting better," he said firmly. "Everything else can be figured out later." When the paramedics arrived, Marcus stepped back but didn't leave. He watched as they quickly assessed Sarah's condition and began treatment with a portable nebulizer. The medication worked almost immediately, and Sarah felt her airways beginning to open. The relief was overwhelming, and tears of gratitude ran down her cheeks. As the paramedics prepared to transport her to the hospital, Sarah looked around for Marcus. She wanted to thank him properly, to get his contact information so she could repay his kindness somehow. But in the commotion of loading her into the ambulance, he seemed to have disappeared back into the crowd of downtown pedestrians, leaving her wondering if he had been real or just a guardian angel who appeared when she needed help most. 3 days later, Sarah was released from the hospital with strict instructions to follow up with a pulmonologist and a prescription for new medications she couldn't afford. The doctors had run extensive tests and discovered that her asthma was more severe than previously diagnosed. They recommended a daily maintenance inhaler that cost over $200 per month, even with her minimal insurance coverage. Sarah sat on the hospital bed, staring at the discharge papers with a sinking heart. The emergency room bill alone would take her months to pay off, assuming she could negotiate a payment plan. She had already missed 3 days of work at the coffee shop, and her manager had been less than sympathetic when she called to explain her absence. "Look, Sarah," her manager had said over the phone, "I understand you were sick, but we can't hold your position indefinitely. We've had to call in extra people to cover your shifts, and it's costing us money." The implication was clear. Her job was in jeopardy because of a medical emergency beyond her control. As Sarah walked slowly home from the hospital, she found herself thinking about Marcus, the stranger who had helped her. She had asked the paramedics if they knew who he was, but they had been too focused on her medical needs to pay attention to the Good Samaritan who called for help. The hospital staff couldn't provide any information either, citing privacy concerns. She wanted desperately to thank him properly, and maybe understand why he had been so calm and capable during her crisis. Most people would have panicked or simply walked away, but Marcus had taken charge of the situation with the confidence of someone accustomed to handling emergencies. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Rivera was dealing with his own set of challenges. He sat in his truck outside Maple Elementary School, waiting for his 8-year-old daughter Emma to finish her after-school program. As a single father working construction, his days were carefully scheduled around Emma's needs, and he had learned to be efficient with every moment. The incident with the young woman having an asthma attack had been weighing on his mind for 3 days. He had wanted to stay at the hospital to make sure she was okay, but Emma's school had called about a parent-teacher conference that couldn't be rescheduled. Being a single parent meant constantly juggling priorities, and Emma always came first. Marcus had experience with medical emergencies from his time in the military, before Emma was born and before everything changed. He had served 2 tours overseas as a medic, skills that had served him well in civilian life more times than he cared to count. But he never talked about his military service, especially not with Emma. Some parts of his past were better left buried. Emma bounced out of the school building with her usual energy, her backpack bouncing behind her. At 8 years old, she was the center of Marcus's world, though he worked hard to make sure she never felt the weight of that responsibility. She had his dark hair and her mother's bright smile, though Maria had been gone for 3 years now. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson says I did really good on my math test," Emma announced as she climbed into the truck. Marcus smiled and helped her with her seatbelt, listening as she chattered about her day. These moments were precious to him, the simple joy of his daughter's excitement over small victories. "That's fantastic, mija. I'm proud of you," Marcus said, using the Spanish endearment his own father had used with him. He had been trying to teach Emma some Spanish, wanting her to understand both sides of her heritage, though it was challenging without Maria there to help. As they drove home to their small apartment, Emma noticed her father seemed distracted. "Are you okay, Daddy? You look worried about something." Children were perceptive in ways that often surprised adults, and Emma had learned to read her father's moods carefully. "Just thinking about work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about," Marcus replied, though he was actually thinking about the woman with the asthma attack. He hoped she had recovered fully and wondered if she had family or friends to help her through what was probably a scary experience. Their apartment was modest but clean, decorated with Emma's artwork and photos of happier times when Maria was still alive. Marcus had worked hard to create a stable, loving environment for his daughter, though he sometimes felt inadequate as a single parent. He worried constantly about whether he was enough, whether Emma was missing out on things he couldn't provide. That evening, as Marcus helped Emma with her homework at the kitchen table, she surprised him with a question that came out of nowhere. "Daddy, why do some people get sick and other people don't?" She was working on a science worksheet about the human body, but her question seemed deeper than the assignment required. Marcus considered his answer carefully. Emma had lost her mother to cancer when she was 5, and she still asked difficult questions about illness and death. "Well, sometimes people's bodies work differently," he explained gently. "Like how some people need glasses to see better, or how some people have allergies. It's not anyone's fault when they get sick." Emma nodded thoughtfully, then continued coloring a diagram of lungs in her workbook. "If someone couldn't breathe, would you help them?" she asked, not looking up from her coloring. Marcus wondered if she had somehow sensed his preoccupation with the incident from earlier in the week. "Of course I would help them," Marcus said firmly. "We should always help people when they're in trouble, especially if we know how to help." It was a lesson he had tried to instill in Emma from an early age, the importance of compassion and community responsibility. After Emma went to bed that night, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He kept thinking about the young woman's frightened eyes and wondering if she was okay. He had left the scene so quickly, focused on getting to Emma's school, that he hadn't even learned her name. The thought bothered him more than it should have. He considered trying to find out what had happened to her, maybe calling the hospital or asking around the neighborhood where the incident occurred. But that seemed like an invasion of privacy, and he didn't want to appear as some kind of stalker. Still, the urge to know that she was safe and recovering nagged at him. Marcus had always been the type of person who followed through on things, who took responsibility seriously. It was part of what had made him a good medic in the army, and what made him a dedicated father now. Leaving loose ends unfinished went against his nature, but in this case, he wasn't sure what the appropriate action would be. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Marcus made a mental note to be more observant during his daily routines around downtown Portland. Maybe he would run into her again, and he could satisfy his curiosity about whether she had recovered from her frightening ordeal. 2 weeks after her hospitalization, Sarah returned to work at Brewhaven with a heavy heart and lighter wallet. The medical bills had started arriving, each envelope bringing fresh anxiety about her financial situation. Her manager had reluctantly allowed her to keep her job, but had reduced her hours as punishment for the inconvenience her medical emergency had caused. Sarah now worked only 20 hours per week instead of 35, which meant her already tight budget had become impossible to manage. She had applied for assistance programs at the hospital and was waiting to hear back, but in the meantime, she was falling behind on rent and utilities. The expensive maintenance medication the doctors had prescribed remained unfilled at the pharmacy. The coffee shop was busier than usual on Friday afternoon, filled with office workers grabbing their caffeine fix before the weekend. Sarah moved efficiently behind the counter, trying to ignore the occasional wheeze in her chest. She had been rationing her rescue inhaler, using it only when absolutely necessary, which meant accepting a lower level of breathing comfort than she should have. Mrs. Chen from the bakery below her apartment had been bringing Sarah homemade soup every few days, claiming she had made too much for herself. Sarah suspected the elderly woman understood her financial struggles and was trying to help, without making her feel like a charity case. The kindness meant more to Sarah than Mrs. Chen probably realized. As Sarah prepared a complicated latte order, she found herself thinking about Marcus again. She had returned to the spot where her attack had occurred several times, hoping to see him. She wanted to thank him properly and maybe learn more about him. There had been something about his calm competence that had stayed with her, a sense that he was someone who could be trusted in a crisis. The afternoon rush was beginning to slow when Sarah noticed a commotion outside the coffee shop window. A small crowd was gathering around someone on the sidewalk, and she could see people pointing and talking urgently. Her stomach dropped as she realized someone else might be having a medical emergency. Without thinking, Sarah asked her coworker to cover the register and hurried outside to see if she could help. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was offering assistance when she could barely afford her own medical care, but she couldn't ignore someone in distress. As she pushed through the small crowd, Sarah saw a middle-aged man sitting on the ground looking pale and confused. An elderly woman knelt beside him, holding his hand and speaking softly. "He just collapsed," she explained to no one in particular. One minute he was walking normally, and the next minute he was on the ground. Sarah knelt down beside the man and noticed he was sweating profusely despite the cool weather. His breathing was shallow but regular, and his eyes were focused but frightened.
"Sir, can you tell me your name?"
she asked gently, remembering the calm way Marcus had spoken to her during her own emergency. "Robert," the man replied weakly. "Robert Martinez. I think something's wrong with my heart. It feels like it's racing and I feel dizzy." Sarah could see genuine fear in his eyes, the same fear she had felt when she couldn't breathe. Someone in the crowd said they had already called 911, which was a relief. Sarah stayed with Robert, talking to him about simple things to keep him calm while they waited for the paramedics. She asked about his family, his work, anything to keep his mind occupied and prevent panic from making his condition worse. As the sirens approached, Sarah felt a familiar presence beside her. She looked up to see Marcus kneeling on Robert's other side, his hands moving efficiently to check the man's pulse and assess his condition. Their eyes met for a moment, and Sarah saw recognition flicker across his face. "You're the woman from 2 weeks ago," Marcus said quietly, not wanting to distract from Robert's needs but clearly surprised to see her. "The asthma attack. Are you okay now?" Even in the middle of helping someone else, he was concerned about her welfare. "I'm better, thanks to you," Sarah replied, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with her breathing problems. "You disappeared before I could thank you properly." She wanted to say more, but the ambulance was pulling up, and Robert needed their attention. Marcus smoothly transitioned Robert's care to the paramedics, providing them with clear information about what he had observed. Sarah was impressed again by his competence and wondered about his background. Most people would have been flustered or uncertain in this situation, but Marcus moved with practiced efficiency. As Robert was loaded into the ambulance, the crowd began to disperse. Sarah and Marcus found themselves standing together on the sidewalk, finally having the opportunity to talk properly. Up close, Sarah could see that Marcus looked tired, with the kind of weariness that came from carrying heavy responsibilities. "I've been hoping I'd run into you," Sarah admitted, feeling slightly embarrassed by her confession. "I wanted to thank you for what you did. You probably saved my life, and then you just vanished." She studied his face, trying to read his expression. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, not because he regretted helping her, but because he wasn't used to being thanked so earnestly. Anyone would have done the same thing, he said, though they both knew that wasn't true. Many people had walked past Sarah during her attack without stopping. "No, they wouldn't have," Sarah said firmly. "Trust me, I noticed how many people ignored me before you showed up. You knew exactly what to do, and you stayed calm when I was terrified." She paused, gathering courage for her next question. "Are you a doctor or a paramedic or something?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before answering. "I was a medic in the Army, but that was a long time ago. Now I work construction." He didn't elaborate on his military service, and Sarah sensed it wasn't a topic he discussed easily. They talked for a few more minutes, with Sarah learning that Marcus had a daughter and lived across town. She told him about her struggles with medical bills and her reduced work hours, though she tried not to sound like she was complaining. Marcus listened with the same focused attention he had given her during her emergency. When Sarah mentioned that she couldn't afford her prescribed medication, Marcus's expression grew troubled. He understood financial hardship as a single father, but he couldn't imagine having to choose between breathing properly and paying rent. The thought of her rationing her inhaler worried him more than he wanted to admit. "I should get back to work," Sarah said reluctantly, realizing she had been away from the coffee shop longer than intended. "But maybe we could get coffee sometime. I mean, somewhere other than where I work." She felt bold making the suggestion, but the connection she felt with Marcus seemed worth the risk of embarrassment. Marcus smiled for the first time since she had met him, and Sarah realized how much it changed his face. "I'd like that," he said simply. They exchanged phone numbers, and Sarah felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. As she walked back into Brewhaven, she couldn't help but wonder if fate had somehow arranged for them to meet again at another medical emergency. Sarah and Marcus met for coffee the following Tuesday at a small cafe neither of them had been to before. Sarah had chosen her outfit carefully, settling on a simple blue sweater that complemented her eyes and didn't make her look as tired as she felt. She arrived a few minutes early and chose a corner table where they could talk privately. Marcus walked in exactly on time, and Sarah noticed he was carrying a small gift bag. He looked nervous, which surprised her since he had seemed so confident during both emergency situations she had witnessed. When he sat down across from her, he slid the bag across the table with an almost shy expression. "What's this?" Sarah asked, curious and touched by the unexpected gesture. She opened the bag to find her prescribed maintenance inhaler, the expensive one she couldn't afford. Her eyes widened in shock, and she looked up at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "You mentioned you couldn't afford your medication," Marcus said quietly. His eyes focused on his coffee cup rather than her face. "I know what it's like to have to choose between necessities. And breathing isn't optional." He had spent most of his paycheck on the medication, but seeing Sarah's relief made it worthwhile. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. No one had ever done something so thoughtful and generous for her, especially someone she barely knew. "Marcus, I can't accept this. It's too expensive and we hardly know each other." But even as she protested, her fingers closed around the inhaler protectively. "You can pay me back when you're able," Marcus said, finally meeting her eyes. "Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better about accepting it. But please use it. I've seen what happens when people don't take care of their health because they can't afford to." There was a heaviness in his voice that suggested personal experience. They talked for 2 hours, sharing stories about their lives with surprising openness. Sarah learned that Marcus had been raising his daughter Emma alone for 3 years, ever since his wife Maria had died from cancer. He spoke about Emma with such love and pride that Sarah could see fatherhood was his greatest joy and biggest challenge. Marcus discovered that Sarah had been on her own since aging out of foster care at 18. She had worked multiple jobs while putting herself through community college, only to struggle with finding stable employment that offered decent health insurance. Her asthma had developed in her early 20s, adding another layer of complexity to an already difficult financial situation. "Sometimes I wonder what I did to deserve all these challenges," Sarah admitted, immediately feeling embarrassed by her self-pity. "I mean, I know everyone has problems, but it feels like every time I get a little ahead, something knocks me back down." Marcus nodded with understanding. "After Maria died, I felt like that for a long time. Like the universe had decided to test how much I could handle before breaking. But Emma needed me to keep going, so I learned to take things one day at a time." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Having someone to fight for makes the struggles feel more worthwhile." Their conversation was interrupted when Marcus's phone rang. He apologized and answered it, his expression changing to one of concern as he listened. "I'll be right there," he said before hanging up. He looked at Sarah apologetically. "Emma's school nurse called. She's running a fever and needs to be picked up." Sarah felt disappointed that their time together was ending so abruptly, but she was also impressed by how quickly Marcus's priorities shifted to his daughter's needs. "Of course, go take care of her. I hope she feels better soon." She meant it sincerely, already caring about the little girl she had never met. "Would you like to come with me?" Marcus asked impulsively, surprising himself with the invitation. "I mean, if you don't have to work or anything. Emma's pretty social and she might enjoy meeting you." He wasn't sure why he had made the offer, but something felt right about including Sarah in his family emergency. Sarah was touched by the invitation but hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude on your family time, especially if she's not feeling well." She had never been around children much and wasn't sure how to interact with an 8-year-old. "Please," Marcus said, and Sarah could hear genuine desire in his voice, not just politeness. "Emma asks a lot of questions about why I don't have friends, and it might be nice for her to see that I'm capable of normal social interactions." His honesty made Sarah laugh. and she agreed to accompany him. At the school, Emma looked small and pale in the nurse's office, but she perked up when she saw her father. "Daddy, my head hurts and my stomach feels funny," she announced, reaching for him with the complete trust that only children showed their parents. Marcus introduced Sarah as his friend, and Emma studied her with curious brown eyes that were exactly like her father's. "Are you the lady Daddy helped when she couldn't breathe?" Emma asked with the directness that only children possessed. Sarah was surprised that Marcus had mentioned their first meeting to his daughter. "Yes, that's me. Your daddy was very brave and helped me when I was scared." She knelt down to Emma's level, instinctively understanding that children preferred to be spoken to as equals. Emma nodded seriously. "Daddy helps lots of people. He says it's important to take care of each other." She looked at Sarah with new interest. "Do you like coffee?" "Daddy drinks too much coffee and it makes him jumpy sometimes." The three of them left the school together, with Emma chattering despite her fever about her day and her friends and her upcoming school project about family traditions. Sarah found herself charmed by the little girl's personality and impressed by the clear bond between father and daughter. At Marcus's apartment, Sarah helped make Emma comfortable on the couch while Marcus called his supervisor to explain that he wouldn't be returning to work that day. Sarah noticed how seamlessly he juggled his responsibilities and how naturally he prioritized his daughter's needs over everything else. As the afternoon progressed, Emma's fever broke and she became more animated. She showed Sarah her room, which was decorated with artwork and photos, and talked about her mother in the casual way children discussed difficult topics. "Mommy got sick and went to heaven, but she left me all her jewelry to wear when I'm older," Emma explained matter-of-factly. Sarah spent the evening with them, helping Marcus make dinner and listening to Emma read from her favorite book. She felt more comfortable and welcome than she had in years, like she was part of something warm and genuine. When it was time for Emma to go to bed, the little girl hugged Sarah goodbye and asked if she would come visit again soon. Walking Sarah to her bus stop later that evening, Marcus seemed more relaxed than she had seen him before. "Thank you for today," he said sincerely. "Emma really liked you, and she's a pretty good judge of character." He paused, then added quietly, "I liked having you there too. It felt like we were a family, even for just one day." Sarah's heart skipped at his words, but she tried to keep her response light. "Emma is amazing. You're doing an incredible job raising her." She wanted to say more about how she felt, about how natural it had seemed to be part of their little family unit, but it seemed too soon for such admissions. As the bus approached, Marcus impulsively reached for Sarah's hand. "I know this might sound crazy since we've only just met, but I feel like you understand me in a way most people don't. Would you like to make this a regular thing? Spending time together, I mean." Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the mild evening weather. "I'd really like that," she said honestly. As the bus pulled away, she waved at Marcus through the window and realized that her life had taken an unexpected turn towards something that might actually be happiness. Over the next month, Sarah found herself becoming a regular part of Marcus and Emma's routine. She would stop by their apartment after work, helping Emma with homework while Marcus prepared dinner. On weekends, they would go to the park or visit the children's museum, with Sarah watching in amazement as Marcus patiently answered Emma's endless questions about everything, from why the sky was blue to how elevators worked. Sarah had never experienced this kind of family life before. Growing up in foster care had meant moving frequently and never developing deep, lasting relationships. Being welcomed into Marcus's small family unit felt like discovering a part of herself she hadn't known was missing. Emma had quickly warmed to her, often reaching for Sarah's hand during their outings and asking for her opinions on important 8-year-old matters like which shoes looked better with her favorite dress. The financial pressures in Sarah's life hadn't disappeared, but they felt more manageable with Marcus's support. He had quietly taken care of several more medication refills, brushing off her attempts to pay him back with the explanation that they were helping each other. When Sarah's hours at the coffee shop were cut further due to the owner's financial troubles, Marcus helped her find a part-time position at a medical supply company that offered better health insurance. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Sarah asked him one evening as they walked through the neighborhood after putting Emma to bed. She had been wondering about his motivations for weeks, unable to understand why someone would be so generous to a relative stranger. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. When Maria was sick, people helped us in ways I never could have asked for. Neighbors brought meals. Friends watched Emma when I had to take Maria to treatments. My supervisor let me adjust my schedule without penalty. He paused, remembering. I learned that sometimes people help because they can, not because they expect anything in return. Sarah understood there was more to it than general kindness, though. She had seen the way Marcus looked at her sometimes, with an expression that suggested his feelings were developing beyond friendship. Her own emotions were becoming increasingly complicated as well. She cared deeply for both Marcus and Emma, but she was terrified of disrupting the stability they had built together. Their relationship took an unexpected turn one rainy Thursday evening, when Emma came down with a high fever and severe cough. Marcus was clearly worried, pacing around the apartment while monitoring Emma's temperature and debating whether to take her to the emergency room. Sarah recognized the signs of parental panic and gently suggested they call Emma's pediatrician first. The doctor recommended bringing Emma in immediately, suspecting pneumonia based on her symptoms. Marcus was barely holding himself together as they waited in the pediatric urgent care center, his military composure cracking under the stress of watching his daughter suffer. Sarah found herself naturally taking charge, speaking with the nurses and keeping track of Emma's medications while Marcus focused entirely on comforting his frightened child. Emma was indeed diagnosed with pneumonia and needed to be hospitalized for observation and IV antibiotics. As they settled into the pediatric wardroom, Emma weakly asked for both Marcus and Sarah to stay with her. "I want Daddy on one side and Sarah on the other side," she whispered, reaching out with both small hands. Sarah felt her heart breaking and swelling simultaneously as she realized Emma now considered her family. She looked at Marcus, who nodded gratefully, and they arranged themselves on either side of Emma's hospital bed. For the next 2 days, they took shifts staying with Emma, one sleeping while the other remained alert in case she needed anything. During one of their quiet moments together while Emma slept, Marcus took Sarah's hand and spoke words that changed everything between them. "I know this is complicated and I know we haven't known each other very long, but I need you to know something." He paused, gathering courage. "I'm falling in love with you, Sarah. Not just because you're wonderful with Emma, but because you make me remember what it feels like to have a partner. Someone who understands and supports without being asked." Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks before she realized she was crying. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Both of you. I never thought I'd have a family, and now I can't imagine my life without you and Emma in it." The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. Their first real kiss happened in that hospital room, gentle and full of promise while Emma slept peacefully between them. It was hardly romantic by conventional standards, but it felt perfect for their unconventional relationship that had been built on crisis, kindness, and gradual trust. Emma recovered quickly once the antibiotics took effect, but the experience had bonded the three of them even more closely. She began referring to Sarah as "my Sarah," and started asking questions about whether Sarah might move in with them permanently. Marcus and Sarah exchanged meaningful looks over Emma's head, both thinking the same thing but not yet ready to voice such a significant step. The topic came up naturally, a few weeks later when Sarah's landlord announced he was selling the building and all tenants needed to find new housing within 30 days. Sarah was overwhelmed by the prospect of finding an affordable apartment in Portland's competitive rental market, especially with her limited income and medical expenses. "Move in with us," Marcus said without hesitation when she told him about her housing situation. "Emma's been hoping you would, and honestly, so have I. We can figure out the practical details later, but I want you here, Sarah. I want us to be a real family." Emma overheard the conversation and erupted in excitement, dancing around the living room and making plans for how they would rearrange furniture to make space for Sarah's belongings. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Sarah found herself laughing despite her anxiety about such a big change. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked Marcus privately later that evening. "Living together is a huge step, especially when Emma's involved. What if we're moving too fast? What if it doesn't work out?" Her fears about abandonment and instability ran deep, rooted in years of temporary foster placements. Marcus took her hands in his expression serious but warm. "Sarah, I've watched you with Emma for weeks now. I've seen how you naturally put her needs first, how you make her laugh when she's sad, how you stayed calm when she was sick and I was falling apart. You're not going anywhere and neither are we." His voice carried the confidence of someone who had made a decision with his whole heart. "Besides," he added with a small smile, "Emma has already started moving your coffee mug to the cabinet with ours, and she's been practicing writing your name with our last name. I think in her mind you're already family." Sarah felt the last of her resistance melting away. The idea of having a permanent place to belong, of being part of Marcus and Emma's daily life instead of just visiting it, was too wonderful to refuse out of fear. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do it. Let's be a family." The decision felt right in a way that surprised Sarah with its certainty. For the first time in her adult life, she was making a choice based on love and hope rather than necessity and survival. As Marcus pulled her into his arms, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important moments in life happened not with grand gestures, but with quiet conversations in hospital rooms and simple offers of a place to call home. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing her pajamas, having obviously been eavesdropping. "Does this mean Sarah is going to live here forever?" she asked with the directness that never failed to amuse the adults in her life. "If she wants to," Marcus replied, looking at Sarah with eyes full of love and possibility. "I want to," Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with how certain she sounded. Emma squealed with delight and launched herself at both adults, creating a group hug that felt like the beginning of something beautiful and lasting. Moving in together proved to be both easier and more challenging than any of them had anticipated. Emma was thrilled to have Sarah as a permanent fixture in their home, but she also struggled with sharing her father's attention in new ways. There were tears and tantrums as the 8-year-old worked through her complex feelings about their changing family dynamic. Sarah found herself navigating unfamiliar territory as she tried to establish her role in Emma's life without overstepping boundaries or replacing memories of Maria. She had no experience with children beyond the past few months with Emma, and some days she felt completely overwhelmed by the responsibility of helping to raise another person. The practical aspects of combining their lives required patience and compromise. Sarah's belongings barely filled 2 boxes, a stark reminder of how transient her life had been. But even finding space for her few possessions in Marcus's efficiently organized apartment required creative solutions. They converted a corner of the living room into a small workspace for Sarah, and Emma delighted in helping arrange and rearrange furniture until everything felt right. Financially, sharing expenses made life significantly easier for both Sarah and Marcus. Sarah could finally afford her medications without help, and Marcus felt less pressure about providing everything for Emma on his construction worker's salary. They established a system for splitting costs that felt fair to both of them, though Marcus still insisted on paying for Sarah's medical expenses, claiming it was his contribution to keeping their family healthy. 3 months after Sarah moved in, their relationship faced its first real test when Marcus received unexpected news from his supervisor. The construction company was losing a major contract, and several workers would be laid off effective immediately. Marcus's experience and reliability had kept him employed longer than some of his co-workers, but the writing was on the wall. "I should start looking for another job immediately," Marcus told Sarah that evening after Emma had gone to bed. His stress was evident in the tension around his eyes and the way he kept running his hands through his hair. "Construction work is unpredictable, but I've never been unemployed since Emma was born. I don't know how long our savings will last." Sarah could see the fear beneath Marcus's practical concerns. As a single father, he had always carried the weight of being solely responsible for their financial stability. Now that he had Sarah and their relationship to consider as well, the pressure felt even more intense. "We'll figure it out together," Sarah said firmly, taking his hands to stop their restless movement. "I can pick up extra shifts at the medical supply company, and maybe I can find weekend work somewhere else. We're not just you supporting everyone anymore, Marcus. We're a team." The concept of shared responsibility was still foreign to Marcus after years of handling everything alone. He had been the sole provider and decision-maker for so long that accepting help felt almost impossible, even from someone he loved and trusted completely. Sarah proved her commitment to their partnership by immediately taking action. She approached her supervisor about increasing her hours and applied for several weekend positions at local businesses. When a second part-time job at a pharmacy became available, She accepted it despite the challenging schedule it would create. Emma initially didn't understand why the adults in her life suddenly seemed more worried and were working longer hours. She acted out at school and at home, sensing the stress even though Marcus and Sarah tried to shield her from their concerns. One evening she broke down in tears asking if they were going to have to move away or if Sarah was going to leave them. "Sweetheart, nobody is going anywhere," Sarah assured her, pulling Emma onto her lap for a cuddle. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make changes with their jobs, but that doesn't change how much we love you or how much we want to be together as a family." Marcus watched Sarah comfort his daughter and felt overwhelmed by gratitude and love. Maria had been wonderful with Emma, but she had been sick for so much of their time together that Marcus had forgotten what it felt like to have a true partner in parenting. Sarah's natural instincts with Emma continued to amaze him. After 2 weeks of job searching, Marcus received an offer from a smaller construction company that specialized in residential work. The pay was slightly less than his previous job, but the owner seemed committed to steady employment and treating his workers fairly. Marcus accepted the position, feeling relieved to have income security restored. The experience of facing financial uncertainty together had strengthened Sarah and Marcus's relationship in unexpected ways. They had learned to communicate about money and planning in ways that felt mature and respectful. Sarah had proven that she was committed to their family's well-being, not just enjoying the benefits of being part of it. One evening, as they sat on the couch while Emma played nearby, Marcus brought up a topic that had been on his mind for weeks. "I've been thinking about Emma's school situation," he said carefully. "She's been asking questions about why her last name is different from yours, and some of the other kids have been making comments." Sarah felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. She had noticed Emma's confusion about their family structure, but hadn't known how to address it. "What kind of comments?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Nothing malicious, just typical kid stuff about families and who belongs to whom. But I think Emma would feel more secure if we made our commitment to each other more official." Marcus paused, studying Sarah's face for her reaction. "I'm not talking about a big wedding or anything complicated. Just making it legal so Emma knows we're permanent." Sarah's heart began racing as she realized Marcus was proposing marriage in his practical, understated way. "Are you asking me to marry you?" she said quietly, not wanting Emma to overhear such an important conversation. "I'm asking if you want to build a life with us that's recognized by law and society," Marcus replied with characteristic directness. "I love you, Sarah, and I want Emma to have the security of knowing our family is official and permanent." Before Sarah could respond, Emma appeared beside the couch with the uncanny timing children seem to possess during important adult conversations. "Are you and Sarah going to get married, Daddy?" she asked with excitement. "Can I be the flower girl? Can we have cake?" Marcus and Sarah looked at each other and burst into laughter at Emma's priorities. "What do you think, Mija?" Marcus asked his daughter. "Should Sarah be part of our family forever?" Emma launched herself at Sarah with enthusiastic agreement, settling the question in her characteristically decisive way. "Yes, and we should have a party with dancing," she declared, already planning their celebration. Sarah found herself crying happy tears as she held Emma and reached for Marcus's hand. "Yes," she whispered, meaning it with every part of her heart. "I want to be part of this family forever." The wedding took place 6 months later in the small community center where Emma attended after-school programs. They had chosen the venue because it felt connected to their daily life, rather than trying to create something artificial or expensive. Mrs. Chen from the bakery insisted on making their wedding cake, and Emma's teacher offered to coordinate the simple decorations that Emma had enthusiastically designed. Sarah wore a simple cream-colored dress she had found at a consignment shop, and Marcus had bought his first suit in years, which Emma declared made him look very handsome and fancy. Emma served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her responsibilities seriously and practicing her walk down the aisle for weeks beforehand. The guest list was small but meaningful. Marcus's parents had driven up from California, his construction crew served as groomsmen, and several of Sarah's co-workers from both jobs attended. Mrs. Chen and a few other neighbors who had become like family completed the gathering. Everyone who attended understood that they were witnessing something special, the formation of a family that had chosen each other despite difficult circumstances. During the ceremony, Emma stood between Sarah and Marcus, holding both their hands as they exchanged vows they had written themselves. Marcus promised to support Sarah's dreams and help her build the stable life she had never experienced growing up. Sarah vowed to love Emma as her own daughter, and to be the partner Marcus deserved after years of carrying his responsibilities alone. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Emma cheered loudly before either adult could kiss, making everyone laugh and perfectly capturing the joy of the moment. The reception was casual and warm, with homemade food and dancing to music played from someone's phone speaker. Emma danced with every adult present and fell asleep in Sarah's arms during the last dance between the new bride and groom. The first year of marriage brought adjustments and growth for all three of them. Sarah legally adopted Emma, a process that required extensive paperwork but felt essential for their family's security. Emma delighted in learning to write her new last name and took great pride in introducing Sarah as her mom to anyone who would listen. Sarah's health improved significantly, with proper medication and regular medical care. The stress-related asthma attacks that had plagued her for years became rare as her living situation stabilized. She was able to reduce her working hours to focus on completing her college degree in healthcare administration, a goal she had abandoned years earlier but now felt achievable with Marcus's support. Marcus discovered that sharing parental responsibilities allowed him to be a better father to Emma. With Sarah handling some of the daily logistics of school and activities, he could focus more on quality time and meaningful conversations with his daughter. Emma flourished with the attention and consistency that two loving parents could provide. Their financial situation steadily improved. As Sarah advanced in her career and Marcus took on supervisory responsibilities at the construction company, they were able to move to a larger apartment in a better school district, and Emma finally had her own room decorated exactly as she wanted it. For the first time in any of their lives, they had emergency savings and could plan for the future instead of just surviving each month. 2 years after their wedding, Sarah faced an unexpected challenge when her asthma suddenly worsened, despite her careful medication routine. After extensive testing, doctors discovered that her condition had evolved into a more complex respiratory issue that would require ongoing treatment and lifestyle modifications. The diagnosis was frightening for all of them, bringing back memories of Maria's illness and the uncertainty it had created. But this time, Marcus wasn't facing a medical crisis alone. Sarah had a strong support system and access to excellent healthcare, and Emma was old enough to understand and help with treatment routines. "I'm not going anywhere," Sarah assured Marcus and Emma during a family meeting about her diagnosis. "This is manageable with proper treatment, and I have both of you to help me stay healthy. We're going to handle this together, just like we handle everything else." Emma took her role as helper seriously, learning to recognize the signs of Sarah's breathing difficulties and reminding her about medications. Marcus researched treatment options and accompanied Sarah to every medical appointment, applying the same protective instincts he had always shown toward Emma. The experience reinforced their understanding that life would always present challenges, but facing them as a united family made even difficult situations manageable. They had learned to communicate openly about fears and concerns, and Emma was growing up with the security of knowing that problems could be solved through cooperation and love. On the 3rd anniversary of Sarah's first asthma attack, the day that had brought Marcus into her life, they returned to the downtown corner where they had first met. Emma was now 11 and rolled her eyes at her parents' sentimental gesture, but she agreed to take a family photo at the spot where their love story had begun. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped to help me that day?" Sarah asked Marcus as they watched Emma play in the nearby park. Marcus considered the question seriously before answering. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not that day, but somehow. People who are meant to be together usually find a way." He paused, watching Emma climb confidently to the top of the playground equipment. "Besides, helping people isn't really a choice for me. It's just who I am." Sarah smiled, remembering the calm competence he had shown during her crisis and countless other emergencies since then. "That's exactly why I fell in love with you," she said. "You're the kind of person who steps up when people need help, even when it's inconvenient or complicated." As they gathered their things to head home, Emma ran up to them with grass stains on her clothes and joy on her face. "Can we come back here next year too?" she asked. "I like that this is where our family started." Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look full of shared history and future plans. Absolutely, they said in unison, each taking one of Emma's hands as they walked toward their car and their life together, built on the foundation of one stranger's willingness to help another person breathe.